Hello, this is Lector preparation for the 25th Sunday in Ordinary Time this year. That's September the 20th, 2015. It's also Catechetical Sunday. And this is the week approaching the visitation of Pope Francis to the United States, as we're anticipating that. So, to our readings today. The first reading is from the Book of Wisdom. And I'm in our guidebook on page 260. The first thing that they recommended is that we read chapters 1 and 2 to get a sense of this first reading. We've mentioned this before, and sometimes it's more important than others. This one is important to understand because it's kind of an unusual reading in a way. So, in this first book of wisdom, the book of wisdom is one of the apocryphal books, which, in other words, it's a part of the collection which we call the Old Testament. There is some dispute among Christians as to which ones are most properly included. Catholics have what we call what the Protestants call apocryphal or deuterocanonical books, and these are books in the Old Testament which were considered to be scripture for some Jews, but not for others. And for the most part, these were writings which were done in Greek, and it had to do during the reign of the Greeks over the Jews by Alexander the Great. He conquered Israel and tried and worked hard to Hellenize them, including their religion. Anyway, so this is the book of wisdom, and so I'm just going to try to give you a summation of what's going on in this book ahead of time. I really would like you to read it if you can. It's not the easiest reading. You have to really think about it because it's a form that we're not accustomed to. But in the first chapter, it's entitled Exhortation to Justice, the Key to Life, and it begins, "Love justice, you who judge the earth," and then he goes on to talk about the goodness of justice, a kindly spirit. The Spirit of the Lord fills the world, is all-embracing, and knows what man says. Therefore, no one who utters wicked things can go unnoticed. And then it goes on to talk about them. And then there's the next chapter, or the next section begins before the second chapter, and it's entitled "The Wicked Reject Immortality and Justice." So there's a definite shift, and this is the chapter which we are reading. So we are most of the times when we do these readings, we are reading things which we hear and we want to emulate. But actually, this reading, it's just the opposite. It's telling us what we don't want to emulate. So we want to make sure that we understand this. So he's talking about the wicked here, and the wicked. Okay, so just right before. So he's talking about the wicked. They come. Let us therefore enjoy the good things that are real. Use the freshness of creation avidly. Let us have our fill of costly wine and perfumes, and let no springtime blossom pass us by. Not such a bad thing to say, but to enjoy life, of course. And then it goes on. Let us oppress the needy just man. Let us neither spare the widow nor revere the old man, for his hair grown white with time. Let our strength be our norm of justice, for weakness proves itself useless. So that's not something that we want to that we are not called to emulate. And anyway, so then we get into this book, into this talking about the wicked. And so though I'm looking at the liner notes, those who plot evil see their schemes as good because they help achieve their ends. And how often do we come across that in life? In many ways, even if we do some things which are not so good, it has a good reason for it, and so it's okay. Yeah, I don't know. It's a hard call. Certainly we have to make decisions at times, and they're not always easy. But evil is evil. It says evil is always a liar, even to itself. And then he's talking about the just one. The just one is inspired by the servant of the suffering servant, as we listened in the last week's readings. And at this time of the Book of Wisdom, which was about, I believe it said 50 years before the coming of Jesus, they were just beginning to have a belief in the afterlife. Some of the Jews were, and so the wicked do not believe in the afterlife in the Book of Wisdom. So they talk about the wicked one, and they set him up. They say their self-delusion is complete. They place on God the responsibility belongs on their shoulders. So they're gonna torture this just one just to test him. And if he really is with God, then God will save him. And there's no reason. It's not hard to see how that is compared to Jesus. So a reading from the Book of Wisdom. The wicked say, "Let us beset the just one, because he is obnoxious to us. He sets himself against our doings, reproaches us for transgressions of the law, and charges us with violations on our training. Let us see whether his words be true. Let us find out what will happen to him. For if the just one be the Son of God, God will defend him and deliver him from the hand of his foes. With revilement and torture, let us put the just one to the test, that we may have proof of his gentleness and try his patience. Let us condemn him to a shameful death, for according to his own words, God will take care of him." The word of the Lord. Oh, that was a lot of words for that reading, and I hope that was helpful. The next one is we're in the fourth of 5 consecutive weeks of St. James, and so far James was trying to. This week he turns into internal causes for unethical behavior. First, he emphasizes self-centered attitudes, and then he gives some alternatives. So a few notes to the left there. When it talks about where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, it said, "Let your experience of harm caused by jealousy and ambition color your tone." Think of those: jealousy, self-ambition. It's then he goes into a list. He says, "It's not." This is very important. "It is not enough to render James' listing slowly. You must read with awareness and the value of the need of each of the virtues he lists." So you need to not just read it slow, but you have to say those words appropriately for that word. So one of the words I had to look up. I thought I kind of knew what it meant, and I did, but the word was inconstancy, and that means not sticking to a predetermined course. Someone who just is not. Who goes back and forth. In the middle of the reading, it says, where do wars and conflicts come from? It said, think of dissensions within your own parish or your family. Gee, imagine that. Dissensions within a parish or a family. So try to personalize that in your mind. And then he makes a reference to a different translation of the Bible for one of the texts. The NRS, the New Revised Standard, says instead of what is written there, it says, "You want something you do not have it, so you commit murder, and you covet something and cannot obtain it, so you engage in disputes and conflicts." A little bit easier to understand by that. Also very important, the last 2 sentences. He said this final instruction on prayer should be a prayer, not an accusation. So we need to not be condescending in that. A reading from the letter of St. James. Beloved, where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there is disorder and every foul practice. But the wisdom from above is first of all pure, then peaceable, gentle, compliant, full of mercy and good fruits, without inconstancy or insincerity. And the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace for those who cultivate peace. Where do wars and where do the conflicts among you come from? Is it not from your passions that make war within your members? You covet, but do not possess. You kill and envy, but you do not obtain. You fight and wage war. You do not possess because you do not ask. You ask, but do not receive, because you ask wrongly to spend it on your passions. The word of the Lord. So finally, the gospel. And so this account happens right after the transfiguration on Mount Tabor. And they're walking along. Jesus is giving his... there are 3 times in Mark's gospel when he gives a prediction about his passion. And this is the second one. The other one was last week, and that was the one where when he started to talk about it, Peter said, "No, Jesus, don't do it that way." And he says, "Get behind me, Satan." Well, he's teaching them about it again, and it's interesting. It says they were afraid to question him. Well, I guess so. If your leader has been called Satan, you might be a little bit hesitant to question. So they still don't understand, and that is exemplified then as they're talking about when they come to Capernaum, and in the house he asks them question, "What were you arguing about?" He knew what they were arguing about. They didn't answer because they had been talking among themselves on who was the greatest. They knew that was petty and not what he wanted to hear. And I suppose they were a little bit ashamed. In our notes it says they recognized their shallowness. And then he sat them down, he brought a child to them, and he said, "Whoever receives a child such as this in my name receives me, and whoever receives me receives not me but the one who sent me." So they really didn't quite get it at the time, but the child that he places in front of himself really represents the disciples. So those who will accept the disciples and what he has to bring to them are accepting God. And the child represents the poor and people of no status. So it's not the rich and powerful that they're called to be. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. Jesus and his disciples left from there and began a journey through Galilee, but he did not wish anyone to know about it. He was teaching his disciples and telling them, "The Son of Man is to be handed over to men, and they will kill him. After 3 days, and 3 days after his death, the Son of Man will rise." But they did not understand the saying, and they were afraid to question him. They came to Capernaum, and once inside the house, he began to ask them, "What were you arguing about on the way?" But they remained silent. They had been discussing among themselves on the way who was the greatest. Then he sat down, called the 12, and said to them, "If anyone wishes to be first, he shall be the last of all, and the servant of all." Taking a child, he placed it in their midst, and putting his arms around it, he said to them, Whoever receives one child such as this in my name receives me, and whoever receives me receives not me, but the one who sent me. The Gospel of the Lord. Thank you again for your time and your dedication to this ministry. God bless.